I thought I knew my own house. That's what keeps coming back to me, even now. 31 years I lived in that house on Ridgemont Crescent in Barrie. I know which step creaks when you come down at night. I know the way the kitchen window fogs up every January because the seal went bad in 2009, and I kept meaning to replace it. I know the smell of the place in late October, when the furnace kicks on for the first time after summer, that particular smell of dust burning off the heat exchanger, the one that always made my wife say we needed to call someone. I thought I knew all of it. I didn't. My wife? I'll call her my wife because that's what she was for 23 years. Her name was Diane. She was 58 years old. She taught elementary school for nearly 3 decades. She coached the girls' volleyball team every fall. She made butter tarts every Christmas from her mother's recipe and brought them to the neighbors in little cellophane bags tied with a ribbon. She was the kind of woman that people said things like salt of the earth about. At her school's retirement send-off 2 years ago, one of her colleagues called her the moral compass of the staff room. I believed every word of it. My name is Leonard. I am 63 years old. I spent 35 years as a project coordinator for a municipality in Simcoe County. Pension, benefits, the whole thing. We were not wealthy people, but we were comfortable. We had a house that was paid off. We had 2 cars. We had a daughter, Stephanie, who lives in Guelph with her husband and their 2 boys. We had what looked, from every angle, like a good life. That October, Diane went to visit her sister in Prince Edward Island for 2 weeks. She did this every other year. Her sister has a place near Cavendish, close to the water. They'd go for walks on the beach and watch terrible movies and eat too much salt fish, and Diane always came back looking more rested than I'd seen her all year. I never thought anything of it. The furnace started making a sound the second day she was gone. Not a loud sound, not an alarming sound, exactly. Just a low, rhythmic knocking, like something loose rattling against the ductwork. I went down to the basement to have a look, and I couldn't see anything obviously wrong, but I'm not a furnace person. I've never been handy in that particular way. So I did what I always do. I called someone. The technician's name was a fellow from a local HVAC company that had serviced the furnace for years. He said he could come out the following morning, Thursday. I said that was fine and went back upstairs and didn't think much more about it. He showed up at 8:30. I let him in, pointed him toward the basement door, and went to make myself a second cup of coffee. He was down there for maybe 20 minutes. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. Mr. Kowalski, I need you to come down here. There's a door behind your storage shelves that I can't account for. I can hear something on the other side of it. I didn't want to call out without telling you first. I read that message 3 times. I walked to the top of the basement stairs and stood there for a moment with my coffee still in my hand. Then I set it down on the landing post and went down. He was standing at the far end of the basement, past the water heater, past the old shelving unit we'd had since the kids' toys used to be on it. He was a younger man, maybe mid-30s, and he had his flashlight pointed at a gap behind the shelves where they met the foundation wall. I moved this end out a bit, he said quietly, just to check the ductwork, and I saw that. There was a door in the foundation wall. A proper door, not a crawlspace hatch. A full-size door with a frame, painted the same color as the concrete blocks around it. There was a padlock on it, a heavy one, and a second padlock below that, and the metal bracket had been mounted with lag bolts that looked new. The kind of thing you install when you want something to stay closed. "Do you hear that?" he said. I stood still and listened. There was a sound, very faint, a shuffling, like weight shifting on the other side of that door. I am 63 years old. I spent 35 years managing timelines and logistics and problem solving in a reasonably calm fashion. I can count on one hand the times in my adult life that I have felt genuine fear. Real fear, the kind that comes up through the floor and into the soles of your feet. That was one of those times. I asked him to wait. I called 911. The officer who came, 2 officers actually, they were professional and efficient and didn't waste any time. One of them called out through the door. There was a response, a woman's voice, hoarse and small, saying yes, saying please. They used bolt cutters on both padlocks. The woman inside was 44 years old. Her name was Paula. She told the officers she had been inside that room for, and I remember exactly how she said this, because it didn't sound like a real number at the time, 4 days. There was a camp cot in there, a bucket, 2 grocery bags of food, a single work light plugged into an extension cord that ran under the door gap. She had a phone, but the battery had died. She knew who had put her there. She said the name without hesitating. She said my wife's name. I drove to the police station, and I sat across from a detective named Sergeant Okafor, and I told him everything I knew about my wife, which I was beginning to understand was not as much as I had assumed. He was a patient man. He asked good questions. He did not appear shocked by anything I said, which was either reassuring or troubling. I wasn't sure which. What I learned in that room, and in the days following, came in pieces. Not all at once. The way things like this always come. In pieces, each one a little harder than the last. Paula was not a stranger. She and my wife had known each other for nearly 10 years. They had met through a community fundraising committee, the kind of thing Diane was always involved in. They had been close. Paula had gone through a difficult divorce 6 years ago, and my wife had, by all accounts, been a source of support. What I did not know, and what Paula told the police, and what the police later confirmed through records, was that Diane had approached her about a financial arrangement. An investment opportunity, Paula said. Diane had presented it as a sure thing, had produced documentation that appeared legitimate, had spoken with the kind of confidence that only people you trust can make convincing. Paula had put in $82,000 over 18 months. Her divorce settlement. The money she was going to use to buy a small condo in Barrie and start over. The money was gone. When Paula confronted Diane 3 weeks before I called that HVAC technician, Diane had invited her over to the house. She said they needed to talk. She said she could explain everything. She made tea. The next thing Paula remembered clearly was waking up in that room. I know how that sounds. I know how the mind wants to resist it. I sat with that information for a long time before I could hold it without the whole thing blurring at the edges. This was my wife. This was the woman who had driven my daughter to skating lessons every Saturday for 6 winters. This was the woman who brought meals to her colleague when his mother was sick. This was the woman who said grace at Christmas dinner every year without fail and meant it. The story I told myself about who she was. I had been telling it for 23 years. It was a good story. I had believed it completely. Here is what I should tell you about the money. I had a self-directed RRSP. It wasn't enormous by any standard. I am a retired municipal employee, not a banker. But I had contributed faithfully for 25 years, and when I retired it was sitting just under $400,000. That was supposed to be our retirement. That was supposed to carry us through to our 80s. Diane had been named on the account as a beneficiary, and in 2021, I had added her as a joint account holder at her request, because she said it would make things easier if something happened to me. She had said this in such a reasonable way, at such an ordinary moment, that I had simply agreed and we had gone on to talking about something else. Over the course of 14 months, she had moved $217,000 out of that account. Small transfers, irregular amounts, spread across 11 different transactions. Nothing that would trigger an automatic flag. Nothing that looked like anything other than routine portfolio management, which I rarely checked in any detail because I trusted her. She had opened a second account in New Brunswick, in her name alone. The transfers ended there. I also found out, through the investigation, that she had taken out a life insurance policy on me 3 years ago. A new one, separate from the coverage we already had through my pension. The beneficiary was her sister in Prince Edward Island. I had signed the paper. I remembered signing them, because I remembered thinking it was odd that we needed a second policy, and she had said something about covering any estate costs if we both went at the same time, and I had looked at the paperwork for about 45 seconds before signing. Because I trusted her. I want to be careful here about what I say and what I don't say. The insurance policy was not, on its own, proof of anything. The police looked at it. They noted it. I am simply telling you what was there. Her sister in PEI. I had always liked her. Margaret, she came to our daughter's wedding. She brought homemade jam to us at Christmas. When the police spoke to her, she cooperated fully. She told them she had not known about the account in New Brunswick, had not known about the insurance policy, had not been told anything specific, but she did tell them this. Diane had called her in late September and said she was planning to come to PEI not just for the usual visit, but to stay for a while. To figure things out. To start fresh. Margaret said she hadn't thought much of it at the time. Diane had seemed stressed. She thought it was retirement blues. I don't know what my wife's plan was. I have thought about this more hours than I can count, and I still cannot draw you a straight line from A to B in a way that makes complete sense. But the pieces that are there point towards something that I find, even now almost impossible to hold in my mind. She had been managing an exit for a very long time. The financial transfers, the account in New Brunswick, the trip to her sister's, the problem of Paula, who knew too much and who she did not know how to make disappear quietly. The storage company where she had rented a unit for the past 2 years. Investigators found records of 3 visits in the 2 weeks before she left for PEI. One of those visits was the day before she called a contractor to quote on some basement storage work, which I now understood as the installation of that framed door in the wall behind the shelves. I had been out of the house that day, a dental appointment. I had told her a week in advance that I would be gone from 9 to 11. She had used the window. I thought about that for a long time. The detail of the dental appointment, the fact that she had waited for a specific window of time, planned around my schedule, done this in my basement, in my house, while I was having my teeth cleaned. The precision of it was the thing that caught in my chest. Not rage, not yet. Just this cold, specific astonishment at the distance between the person I had lived with and the person who could do this. I did not call her right away. I spent 3 days talking to lawyers and to the police before I told her anything. My lawyer, a woman in Barrie who had handled our wills, a very calm and methodical person, she told me to say nothing, so I said nothing. Diane called me on the second day, the way she always did when she was at her sister's, to talk about nothing in particular. She asked how the furnace was. She said she thought she could hear wind coming off the straight from where she was sitting. She sounded completely normal. I said the furnace was fine. I asked if she was eating well. She said yes. I have no idea how I said those words. On the 4th day I called her and told her there had been a development at the house, and that I needed her to come home. I kept my voice neutral. She asked what kind of development. I said the basement. She went quiet for just a moment, barely a pause, maybe 2 seconds. And then she said she'd book a flight. She came home on a Saturday morning. I picked her up from the airport in Barrie, which I had always done, which was the ordinary thing to do. We drove home mostly in silence, and I said I was tired and she didn't push it. I made us both tea in the kitchen. She sat across from me at the table. My daughter was sitting in the living room. My son-in-law was parked down the street with my 2 grandsons. My lawyer was available by phone. Sergeant Okafor had been informed that she had arrived. I slid a folder across the table. Inside it were the bank records, the account in New Brunswick, a summary of the 14 months of transfers with dates and amounts, a photograph of the room behind the shelves, taken by the police, with the cot and the bucket, and the extension cord still visible. She looked at the folder. She did not open it right away. For a moment she did not say anything. Then she looked up at me and I saw something in her face that I had never seen there before, and couldn't name precisely. It wasn't guilt, or not only that. It was something more like recalculation. Like she was moving pieces around trying to find a new position. I want to talk to a lawyer, she said. That's your right, I said. I called Sergeant Okafor. He was at the door in 11 minutes. She was charged that afternoon. I will not recount the legal process in detail. It took 14 months. What I will tell you is this. She pleaded guilty to fraud over $5,000, criminal breach of trust, and forcible confinement. She received 4 years in a federal institution. Paula received a settlement, civil proceedings, through the recovery of assets, including the money in the New Brunswick account. She was not made completely whole. Some of the money, it seems, had already been moved again, to somewhere the investigators could not fully trace. But she received most of it back. My RRSP, the $217,000, was recovered in full through the civil judgment. It took time, but it came back. My daughter came inside when the police arrived that Saturday. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched them put handcuffs on her mother. I watched my daughter's face during that moment. I don't have words for it. I don't think I will ever have words for it. But she called me that night, after everything, and she said, "Dad, are you okay?" And I said yes, and I wasn't, but I was more okay than I had expected to be. Here is the thing about a long marriage that I didn't understand until it was over. You think the relationship is the ground you're standing on. But sometimes it turns out it was a platform that was only held up by your own belief in it. And when you find out what was actually underneath, the ground doesn't disappear. You're still standing. You were always the one holding yourself up. You just didn't know it because you never had to test it. I am still in the house on Ridgemont Crescent. I thought about selling. I thought about it seriously for about 4 months. But the house is mine. The window with the bad seal is still there, still fogging up in January. The step still creaks. My daughter brings the boys over some Sundays, and they tear around the backyard, and I make them hot chocolate after, and they sit at the same kitchen table where I slid that folder across to their grandmother. The room behind the shelves, the contractor I hired filled it in, poured a new wall, smooth as the day the house was built. You wouldn't know it had ever been there. The furnace runs quietly now. They found the loose bracket that was making the noise. A 15-minute fix. Some days I think about the fact that if the furnace hadn't knocked, I might have gone on not knowing for a very long time. Or I might not have gone on at all, and that is the thought I don't stay with too long. I simply turn away from it, the way you turn away from something bright that would hurt your eyes if you stared directly at it. I am 63 years old. I have a pension and a paid-off house and a daughter in Guelph, and 2 grandsons who think I make the best hot chocolate in Ontario. Which is true. I know my house now, all of it. Every room, every wall, every inch of ground it stands on. That's enough.